okay, so you have the whole Gallus aspect, because this is going to feed into the viewership talk. Because I went ahead and actually started pulling up some events on, ES Charts, right? Because ES Charts is a sick source for this kind of information. They do a really good job of just gathering up all of the key information that you would want to try and judge how successful an event was. And usually, the metric is hours watched, or you have average viewers. You also have peak, right? And so peak obviously caught everybody's eye because of this final was it didn't even have more viewers peak than the semifinal between Fury and Na'Vi. They broke no records with this final, and so that opens up a bigger conversation about, okay, if you're going to host events in Brazil, in terms of viewership, is that your angle, or is it really so successful on the ground, i.e. selling tickets, selling merch, making money that way, that it makes up for the loss in revenue of selling sponsors because you're going to get less viewers because it's going on there. But one thing that was interesting, and I wanted to bring this up, is that following some of those metrics. So I looked at Antwerp, right? I looked at just same year, so it's similar teams, right, that are playing. And
by the way, even though it's total shithousery on my part, I do low-key just love to point out, because all the haters come at us. Me and you did work the highest viewed major ever. Still. But listen, I'm not actually saying it was just me, but spoil it does look like it.
I do like
it's not really.
That was your thread.
It does feel like
dude,
it.
That tweet had me in stitches.
Of course.
The fans knew that I wasn't going to be there, so obviously.
Yeah, the joke I made, if people don't know, was, right, because they showed the last three majors, and they were like, Stockholm was the highest, like Antwerp was pretty high, and then obviously IM Rio was way lower. I was like, well, yeah, it's just, there's the logical conclusion, right? I was at Stockholm, so everyone watched that. Then they heard Antwerp was a PGL tournament, so everyone who thought that Stockholm, well, that's another PGL event, Thorin's probably there, tuned in anyway, and then everyone knows I don't work IMs, so no one bothered. All I'm saying, ESL, is that's about as plausible as your theory for your viewership. There you go.
So, all right. So to give you guys some context, right, I'll read off because you could say like, okay, well, what does like an IEM Cologne get in terms of viewership, right? So that's something that can establish a peak prestige event, baseline in Europe, good time zone for CIS, for EU, and even for NA at times. Peak viewers was 1.25 million. Average viewers was 276,000. Hours watched was 25 million. And that was over a 93-hour airtime. So total airtime for IM Cologne was 93 hours. And those are the kind of numbers they were getting. Average viewers, 275,000, 25 million hours watched. All right. PGL and IM Rio, like this is where it gets fun. It gets interesting because it's like, okay, is it because it happened in Brazil? Like, how did this work? But in terms of hours watched, they're almost identical. 69 million hours watched. So already, you're thinking, okay, that's interesting because from an hours watched metric, like for a sponsor, it's like hours watched. That's pretty sick, actually. PGL and Rio, same thing. Airtime, 10 hours difference. Rio streamed 10 hours more, 126 hours. PGL, 116. So, if anything, PGL got a little bit better bang for the buck, because they had fewer streamed hours, but they managed to get just about the same amount of hours watched. Average viewership, pretty much bang on the same as well. 550 for the Rio Major, 580 for the PGL. But the thing is, obviously, that catches everybody's eye is that PGL topped out at 2.1 million peak viewers for the grand finals between FaZe and Na'Vi. And IM Rio topped out at 1.4 million. And that wasn't even for the grand finals between Heroic and Outsiders. That was for Na'Vi versus Furia in the semifinals. So if you're going to be setting records, you need the big brands in the finals because that's where you're going to get your peak.
To win, exactly, yes.
And so that was the point that you made, and I really appreciated that point, i.e. that the format, like if you want to break records in terms of viewership, you need to have the bigger teams going deep into the tournament because then you have all the storylines, you have the big brands, people know the players, they can get excited, and then if you have a rivalry, i.e. FaZe Na'Vi, it can blow it out. So that's actually the one thing where it's like Rio could have crushed on every metric, and they might have broken a peak viewership record, even despite the fact that they are in a shithole time zone where the majority of the viewership is on the other side of the world, EU CIS, where we're all watching. It's like 10 p.m. at night on a Sunday night. You may have to work tomorrow morning. It's not great. But, the semifinals, same thing. It was like 3 a.m, watching the second semifinal on Saturday. So like the time zone isn't great if you're watching from EU or CIS. But there could have been a potential where there could have been a chance where they could have broken a peak viewership and crushed it on the hours watched and everything. But that just wasn't the case because their top 8 bracket was just not
too many. Basically, here's the problem. It's not upsets. It's too many upsets. Here's why.
Too many.
Because let's imagine, I'll give you an example where you could have an upset and you could break the prize money, the viewership record. Let's imagine that Furia had played against, like, we'll say Vitality in the semi-final or one of them, and then Furia makes the final, right? That's an upset. Furia's not on paper supposed to beat Vitality. But if Furia played Na'Vi in the final, now you can maybe break the record. Like, you can afford that upset because, one, Furia's a good team, and two, it's one upset. What you can't have happen is this, Semmler. You can't have, like, Vitality lose to Ents, then Ents lose to Mouse, and then Mouse lose. Because when you do that, you're just getting the quality can go down and down and down and down until eventually it's Heroic versus Outsiders in the final. I'm sorry. That is never going to break the record. Like, if people don't know, even the difference in CIS teams between everyone who isn't Na'Vi and Na'Vi is enormous. Like, essentially, you need it to be Na'Vi. Now, luckily, Na'Vi's really good, so we can get that part taken care of. In theory, you might want it to be Brazilian, so if it's Furia, we're cool with that. But in this scenario, what you saw here is why too many upsets are bad, because, spoiler, no one is going to watch Mouse play in the semi-finals. No one gives a fuck about Fnatic currently. They don't have a big fan base. If you keep going down the list, you keep going, Spirit. Who the fuck's Spirit? Like, some of those players have barely played tournaments. So, yeah, the problem was, I think it wasn't purely ESL's fault. Like, it's a bit like Face It London back in the day. If you get unlucky with your bracket, it's not good games. You can't do anything about it as the organizer. But I would say if you're Valve or if you're a TO who wants to push for a format change, this is the best grounds to do it from, because at the end of the day, the only current metric anyone cares about is viewership. So if the grounds are, I have to make viewership better, then make the tournament format a bit sturdier. Fans will never get it, by the way. I'll say it for the millionth time. I don't care about upsets. It's not the upset I have a problem with. It's when the upset becomes too likely, because then you get to 3 upsets and it fucks the whole thing up. You can have one upset. One upset can be amazing, but, like, by the way, spoiler, Furia beating Na'Vi was an upset, but because it's in a best of 3, I don't have a problem with that. It was a great game by Furia. Well played. But if that was a BO1, yeah, that fucks the format, doesn't it?
So to highlight this, and again, another great esports charts article that they've, because they're obviously looking to try and find the thread here. So they put out an article that's going to be linked below. IEM Rio Major 2022 reasons audience decrease, right? And they were trying to figure out as well, trying to find a thread, like, how do you lose 500,000-600,000 in your peak? And so one of the points that they made and that I thought was really interesting is that, again, most popular CSGO teams of 2022 that make a graph by average
That sounds
viewers.
like something I would set my intern to research. How do I get rid of 500 or 600,000 Brazilian fans? Just a little project once I get my fuck you money.
There you go. Yeah, fair enough. Clean that feed up real quick. Na'Vi are the #1 most watched by average viewers, most watched team of 2022 by 100,000 margin, 409,000 average viewers when a Na'Vi match is going on. And this is based off of tournaments, statistics of tournaments with $250,000 prize pool or more. So that is a big deal. G2 are the runners up at 305. Imperial are third with 301. You have to go down to 10th place to find Heroic, 187 average. 187,000 average. And then down to 15th place for Outsiders, 163. So already your finals, you don't even have two top 10 teams that are going at it in the finals in terms of hours, in terms of average viewership. So already your viewership is just tanked. But then, fair enough. We make that point. Does this explain the semifinal though? Because we're talking about Na'Vi Heroic. So you're thinking, or Na'Vi, we're talking about Na'Vi Furia, right? Like, it couldn't have been, I think again, it's the time zone, because that match would have happened at, it would have been like the 3 a.m, like having to wait to, like you're going to sleep. It's like 2, 3 a.m. Not everybody's going to stay up that late to watch a match. So again, like clearly you had some fans that were, you had 100, you had like 1.4 million who stood up to watch, who were there watching. But, could you have set a new record there? Because, that's the most watched team of the year, Na'Vi, going up with Furia, who are the home favorites. So that's already a good storyline right there. That could probably pique some interest. So a quarterfinal. That was a quarterfinal, right? Obviously. Not a semifinal. But point being, it's like, had it been in a better time frame, could you have gotten more out of that match as well? Possible, it's right? Like, that's the thing. Like, you're trying to find the threads. Going
By the
through
way,
here.
I'll even say, if people don't understand, that's actually an area I also don't blame any TO for. In theory, you should always maximize for the highest viewership, no matter where the event is located. Even if that means local time, you fuck the event. Like, if people don't know, in League of Legends, the main viewership is from China. So obviously you should make the tournament so it's good for Chinese hours if you want the viewership. Like, it's not about catering. Remember, the live audience is just the people in the venue. Like, they're already being catered to. You don't have to make everything perfect for them. It's about the millions of people watching on the internet.
Yeah, no, it's the quarterfinals. Okay, so yeah, it wasn't at 3 a.m. on Saturday, obviously.
No, it wasn't.
But,
Here's the thing, it wasn't that bad.
It
Basically,
was late on Friday night because I think Friday we stayed up until 2 as well.
I'll tell you right now, what happened with this was the first game each day, Semmler, would start at 6 p.m. and the second game would be at 9:30 p.m. So the problem is, it's just that it would run to potentially midnight or past midnight sometimes for the second game. So Navi Furia was one of those ones.
Navi Furia was the second game, and it was that's I'm remembering staying up way later than I normally am in order to watch these matches. And it's just like not everybody's going to do that. Your average fan is not going to do that. They're going to want to tune in live.
The other thing to throw in here is ESL had tech problems. It seemed to me like in almost every series similar. There were just games where like a lot of fans didn't notice because they couldn't tell that, like, it's like if you worked on the desk, you can tell when they're doing the extended fill, when they just keep doing here's the thing that gives it away, Semmler. When you're on the desk and they just keep showing random like crowd shots and player shots as we're just voices talking over it, but instead of it being for 30 seconds before they come to a graphic, you're just like that for 5 minutes at a time. That's like the giveaway always, that you're in an indeterminate length fill and that you're just essentially you're in like a holding pattern, like those airplanes outside the airport where they're not allowed to land yet and you have to just keep circling. That's like they were doing that for like every series in the playoff. It felt like, mate, they had a lot of tech problems, I think, that seemed like extended the event.
Yeah. It's like, now that you mention it, that is also something that, the PCs issues. I mean, we talked about that last week, though, I think, where we covered Dexter and all of that sort of situation. And, it was really happening a lot in the earlier phases of the tournament. Fortunately for ESL, it felt like they managed to clean up most of that going into the playoffs, but there were still obviously some parts in the playoffs where it could have been better. All right. Viewership. Yeah. So I guess, that is one thing that, I'm trying to find the positives here. There are positives with this event. IM returns to Brazil in 2023. So clearly, it's like we talked about this, where there's 2 slots that were left open on this announced schedule for ESL next year, their Pro Series, their Pro Tour kind of calendar. There's a spot open in April and there's a spot open in October. So you could have either one of those go for a Brazilian event. And it looks like that they are making it clear that they're going to go back. So if anything, we're going to get more information to go off of then, right? Because we're going to get to have a chance to compare some viewership statistics at least and see like, how does it match up there? And it'll give a chance for the Brazilian fans to redeem themselves and not spit on players. So that's good. Do they get a second chance? Do they deserve a second chance? I guess we'll find out, right? Well, we will find out. They're going to get one. So there you go, guys. It's just like, hey, if it's not Brazil, just don't do it again. But let's see. Example of crowd cheating. Had that. So one thing actually that was kind of what do you think about this? Because I thought that it was just the one time. And remember when we were talking about how Navi are now owned by a betting company, GGBet, right? Like they are, that is the situation.
Well, technically the owner of GGBet also owns Navi. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all around, so technically GGBet, I thought that this happened just once, and it was between Navi and Furia, where Electronic dropped a Negev out of nowhere and left it in the spawn on Nuke, and you're like, interesting. Okay, is this the M249 situation over again? But then it just so happened that it happened the same thing happened in EG versus 9Z and Heroic versus Team Liquid. It happened as well. So there were multiple Negevs dropped throughout this, and it wasn't just by one team, and it wasn't just by one player. So I just wanted to get your thought on it real quick, because it's like, we're not saying cheating, but it is something that has to be brought up in the context that now you have teams that are literally owned by betting companies. So it's like, it is something that needs to be brought up, i.e. this is possible. It is possible that you could have multiple spot bets getting filled out here, where a player gets, it's like 50-1 odds that a Negev gets dropped in the game, and that's just happening. So it is worth mentioning that is happening. Not saying that it is happening, because now it does kind of muddy the waters a little bit that you have other teams that are doing it. So could it just be a fat finger? or could it be the nefarious?
Well, the problem is we know this already happened literally with Na'Vi. So I'm sorry, when a Na'Vi player does it, I don't give them any leeway whatsoever. Of course not.
Yeah,
that's why you can't allow conflict of interest, like betting company people also being directly embroiled with teams that then potentially could influence people to do things like this. Because the reason why this is actually more pernicious than rigging the outcome of the game is because if you do this, you can just get away with it. Like, remember, even the other team doesn't give a shit that you bought the gun. They're like, well, what do we care? You're already defrauding the customers of the way. You know what I mean? Like, what is this bullshit? It's just nonsense, isn't it?
Precisely. So, I mean, it's just worth mentioning. I mean, obviously other teams did it too. So it's just a thing that's worth bringing up because it's just, got to keep an eye on it going forward and see if it's something, and to credit, although, it was always pointed out, the observers were catching it on and the commentators were mentioning it, but it always felt like they weren't, you're not going to say it out loud on the stream, I guess, but they were taking note.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.